All right, let's get it. Today, I have a question. Are polls hard science? And when I mention polls, I'm talking about polls that say stuff like, 50% of Americans feel this way, 70% of Americans feel that way about any particular issue, not just political, just polls in general. I want to sort of dissect, analyze, and present an alternative view, if you will, about polling data. And let me be clear, this is not a video aimed at taking shots. You know what I'm saying? I'm not taking shots at Quinnipiac. I'm not taking shots at Pew Research. I'm not taking shots at Cornell Belcher or anyone else who does polling for a living. That 100% is not my intent. As I was just stating, I just want to shed some light on the process. And by the end of this video, you can come to your own conclusion. You can formulate your own opinion. All right? All right, cool. So, with that being said, let's get into it. And this is what I mean by polling, right? The example that's on the screen. I know polling doesn't just relate to political issues, but we've all seen, if we watch Fox News or CNN or MS Now, we've all seen that they often refer to polls or polling to sort of get the pulse of the country, to get the pulse of America. So this is what I'll be referencing for the duration of the video. This is one of my major concerns when it comes to polling, and this will be discussed more in depth, more in detail as I journey through these slides. But the participation crisis. Modern polling faces a response collapse, with participation dropping from 20% in the year 2000 to as low as 1% today. This makes the typical respondent an outlier rather than a representative average. To put this in layman's terms, who's actually participating in polls? Who actually completes surveys? I don't. I don't know anyone who does personally. So is it a true representation of how the country feels? I mean, a lot of times you'll see the sample size is like 1,500 people. Well, in my opinion, that's not a large enough sample size to say that this is how the entire country feels. But that's just me. Pollsters used weighting to force a small sample to match census demographics. While statistically necessary to avoid a broken scale, it involves multiplying the voices of some and discounting the voices of others, which is what I was alluding to on the previous slide. the sample size, right? And in order to make the math work, quote unquote, they have to utilize this strategy, right? So it almost becomes a numbers game, a law of averages, if you will. The census is a constitutional mandate to count everyone. However, even the census relies on proxies and imputation to account for roughly 18.8 million missing Americans. No matter how sophisticated the math, if the base data is flawed, the results will be flawed. Every insight generated from a skewed base carries that fundamental distortion forward. And I'll discuss later the garbage in, garbage out scenario. But again, in order to make the math work, they have to use somewhat of a manipulation, right? So it's not 100% accurate. I just want you guys to keep that in mind when you see these polls appear on the screen, or when you see polling data, period. I want you to keep that in mind. The logic of polling assumes the 1% who answer are identical to the 99% who don't answer. In a high distrust environment, this assumption is increasingly seen as a statistical hallucination. This lends to the GIGO effect, or GIGO effect, the garbage in, the garbage out, which means basically they take the good data and use it to make the numbers work. Then they take the bad data and they discount it. They throw it out. But if you're relying on the census that isn't even 100% accurate, then everything produced from that moment forward is inaccurate, right? I don't want to give a percentage, but I mean, let's say it's 85% accurate. Do with that as you will, but there's still what they refer to in the polling world as the margin of error. By prioritizing demographic categories over individual responses, the act of cleaning data can feel like the erasure of participants' actual, unvarnished truth. Exactly what I was just saying, right? Do you really feel represented in a poll if you did actually complete the survey? And considering that most of us don't, should most of us feel unrepresented by polling data? It's just a thought. Those who answer polls are statistically more likely to be joiners, people who volunteer, vote in every election, and trust institutions, creating a skewed hologram of a more engaged society than actually exists. Modern US presidential elections are often decided by 1 to 3%, which is the exact size of a standard poll's margin of error. This means we are effectively trying to measure a coin flip with a blunt instrument. I was just talking about the margin of error. Most polls usually say that their data has a 1 to 3% margin of error, so they admit that it's not 100% accurate, right? Which is cool. It's great that they have that. But there's always that margin of error, that small chance that a poll can be completely off. TaxAct can think of a million. And I think back to when Hillary ran against Trump and all of the polling data suggested that Hillary was going to win. And that wasn't that long ago, right? So, to answer the question, is polling hard science? The answer is no. Polling is an art form masquerading as a hard science. From question phrasing to likely voter models, human judgment calls dictate the final objective numbers. However, polling is better than nothing and remains a flawed but necessary tool. It's the difference between walking through a dark forest with a flickering candle versus walking through the forest with your eyes closed, right? While it's not 100% accurate, it does give us a glimpse, right? If you want to call it that. I mean, so take it with a grain of salt is all I'm really saying, right? When you see polling data, take it with a grain of salt. Is it truly representative of the country? Not really. But it does indicate, based on the numbers, what some really feels about a particular topic or subject. All right? All right. Well, I'm going to leave it there for now. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please take a moment to like, share, leave a comment, and also subscribe. You know, I make these videos because I like to share information. There's so much misinformation out there in the world. There's so much misinformation on the internet, on YouTube. So I try and be as factual as I can when I present these videos. So yeah, I would appreciate it if you guys would actually like and share, comment, subscribe, and help the channel grow. It would mean a lot to me. I'm going to leave it there. Like always, thanks for watching, and I appreciate your time. Peace.